It's beer o'clock on Real Ale Craft Beer. Today we got a beer from Wainwright's. It's that side. I went, Wainwright's. There it is over there. So, where does this come from? I remember it's now by Carlsberg breweries. Unbelievably, isn't it? Unbelievably. So where does the story start with Wainwright? I've got quite a big story with this. Before I tell a big story with Wainwright, let's get the beer out into a glass and see what we get. There's the gold bottle cap with the W on the top. I picked this up in Asda, and I picked this up in Asda with a fond smile on my face. So this is a relatively new beer. This is an amber bitter. The original Wainwright was a light golden ale. You can still buy it. I've not had it in a long time. When I reviewed it on the channel many years ago, it was a cracking beer. It was light, it was refreshing, it was tasty. But this brand has a really interesting history. I'll get to it in a moment. It's always about the beer in the glass, isn't it? £1.50 for a bottle of this in my local Asda. You've got a one finger, slightly off-white head. Good levels of carbonation. Quite clear, quite amber. It's definitely an amber coloured beer. It's quite clear to look at. It's not bottle condition, so there's no sediment in the glass whatsoever. Let's get the aroma. Yeah, and it's that lovely, nice, familiar British bitter at 4% ABV aroma. Bottled British beer. It's a bit biscuity, it's a bit malty. Touch of lemon. Let's dive in. Cheers, everybody. And this, for me, if I rewind all the way back to when I first started reviewing beer, there were beers back in 2010 when I started, 15 years ago now, that you could pick up in places like Home Bargains, Asda's, you know, like a Lidl or that sort of thing. You could pick up a bottle of beer for about 90p to £1. Those beers back then were generally beers like Courage Best, Man's Brown Ale, Hobgoblin. You used to be able to buy Hobgoblin for £1 a bottle when I first started reviewing beer, and it was still good in a bottle, £1 a bottle. Home Bargains used to sell bottles of Franciscana Weiss beer for £1 a bottle. Unbelievable. It was great times to drink beer. But my point is, this beer has that very early Courage Best sort of feel about it. And ironically, it's a massive story to tell with this beer. So I want to get the review done first and foremost. But ironically, I mentioned Courage Best. That's part of the full portfolio now of Carlsberg. If Carlsberg wanted to bring back Courage Best, they could. If Carlsberg went through their massive portfolio now of breweries and beers, this may not have been Wainwright Amber. They might have gone, I tell you what we'll do, we'll call it Courage Best because we own that blooming copyright. We own that brand. So how did we get there? let's finish the review and I'll tell you. This is quite a solid, but quite an unremarkable amber beer. It's not going to be a beer that you suddenly jump out of your chair and sing the praises of it. You know, this beer is fantastic. This is your kind of weekly driving beer at 4% ABV that you finish work, you get home, you have your tea, you put your feet up, you switch the Xbox on or your PlayStation and you think, I'll have a little beer in the week whilst I'm playing my Xbox. And this is the sort of thing that you would kind of crack open. My mate drinks Proper Job or Tribute as his Xbox weekly gaming beer. So malty and biscuity, solid yet unremarkable. I think that's very fair for this beer. But the history with it all, it's fascinating. The history, so my rating for the beer, my rating's a 7 out of 10 for a amber, malty, biscuity beer. There's no off flavours. There's nothing wrong with the beer. It's a middling, meddling 7 out of 10 of a beer. Story time. I brewed a beer called Barry Island IPA with Thwaites Brewery, and that beer, very quickly on this, went national in Tesco's. In fact, there was a chance, if Thwaites Brewery played it right, that it would have been a very big challenger to Brewdog's Punk IPA. Because when it was first brewed, I believe it was a better beer than Punk IPA. It was modelled and based on Magic Rock's High Wire. And the first batch of that beer was stonking and we got it right. So right that Tesco's took it nationally throughout the whole of the UK and people really enjoyed it. Back then, there were lots of, 2012 this was, 13 years ago, there was lots of regional breweries around. Jennings, Thwaites Brewery. This is where the Wainwright comes in because it used to be called Thwaites Wainwright. All of these regional breweries were opening up little kind of craft breweries in their big plants. Brains had one. We brewed Barry Island IPA on it. Thwaites introduced a new plant to their brewery, and they made a beer called 13 Guns. 13 Guns. I remember everybody buzzing about this beer at the Great British Beer Festival 2012, 2013. Everybody, to the point where it sold out, it completely sold out, couldn't get 13 Guns. Long story short, I brewed with Brains, I brewed with Shepherd Neame. The regional breweries wanted to brew beer with me. So Thwaites come along, had a conversation with, it was actually a guy from Swansea, just down the road. Was their sales and marketing guy. And he said, why don't you come and brew a beer with us? We'll do a 13 Guns type of beer that's going to blow everything away. And it might even be another beer that goes in the supermarket with Barry Island IPA. And you can see my career trajectory then, couldn't you? You could see like Barry Island IPA in Tesco, maybe I'd get a beer in Sainsbury's. You know, it was that kind of like, it was close. It was close, you know, it was close to being like a massive successful thing. So we agreed it, train tickets come down in the post. I was about to go to the Thwaites Brewery. We agreed the recipe on this beer, and the lovely Welsh guy that organised all of this phoned me up and he said, Simon, we're going bust. Unfortunately, we're going bust. It's not a very nice place to come to at the moment. We're looking for a buyer. And I was gutted. Of course I was gutted. I was gutted not just for me, I was gutted for the whole of Thwaites Brewery. Because they had to, if you think of beers like Lancaster Bomber, that was Thwaites Brewery. They had a couple of dark beers out, Thwaites Brewery. Thwaites Mild, I think was a thing. And then they had the 13 Guns as well, which was fantastic. And they had this Wainwright beer, which was doing really well. Wainwright Golden Ale, which was doing fantastically well. While all this is going on, Marston's are buying breweries throughout the UK. They bought Jennings, they bought Wychwood, they bought Wells and Young's got into trouble. Wells and Young's Brewery got into trouble, so they bought Wells and Young's Brewery. They then purchased Thwaites. They basically, Marston's come in and basically owned a lot of breweries in the UK. Then the situation happened in 2019 with the all that kind of like, you know, sneezing and all that stuff. 2019 happened. Marston's getting into trouble. Marston's got all this debt, they can't service his debt, Marston's getting into trouble. They own all of these breweries, everything's about to all fall down like a pack of cards. By the way, at this stage, when they bought Wells and Young's, that was the Courage brand, Courage Best, which I talked about. Wells, Young's, the amount of breweries that Marston's owned at that time was incredible. They bought Brains, or they kind of bought Brains' pubs. So now Brains' pubs in South Wales are owned by Carlsberg. So what happens when Marston's get into trouble? They look for a bigger buyer. Marston's come in, they swooped a lot. They swooped and they took the lot. So not only, like, they've got such a portfolio of beer. They own Wychwood, the Hobgoblin range of beers, Wainwright's, Courage Brewery. The list, there's so many. Ringwood Brewery, Jennings Brewery. They own so many brands now, do Carlsberg, that going back to my initial story of you know, you could buy a bottle of Courage Best, which was owned by Wells and Young's back then, for 90p a bottle in home bargains. It was 4% ABV. Very similar thing. This is just a kind of another brand that they've just plucked. Let's try and bring Wainwright back of Carlsberg, you know. And it just, but the problem with it all is that a company like Carlsberg will come up with a base recipe for an amber ale. They'll produce it like this. Bombardier, remember Bombardier, the Rick Mail ad? The Rick Mail stuff on the TV? Bombardier beer. That's gone now. That's been completely phased out. Unbelievable. This could be Bombardier, you know, looking at this in the glass, it could very well be Bombardier. And this is where we're sat. As UK beer drinkers now, this is where we're sat. We're sat with this great big lager company from Denmark, owning a lot of these brands in the UK, and they can just plug. They can just go, we haven't brewed this beer for a while, we'll bring that back, Bombardier or whatnot. Let's bring Wainwright back. And it's all kind of bang average brown liquid. It's not like they've gone to any great trouble to brew a great beer for the great British drinking public. They've gone, oh, we'll brew this brown liquid this week and we'll call it that from this brewery. You never know. If you're watching this back in 5 years' time, they might have brought back Courage. They might have brought back... Now, if you think of Courage was one of the biggest brewing companies in the UK at one time. In fact, in 1999, when I worked in a pub, I worked in a place called the Royal Hotel, just up the road here. That was a Courage pub. I was paid by Courage, or Bass Courage or something I was paid by. It was on my wage slip. You know, they were big companies. Just so for Carlsberg to own a whole blooming lot, like, I find it a bit domineering, a bit like they're not going to overly care. they're not going to overly care. I know Heineken own Beavertown, don't they? But anyway, you get my point. 5 years' time, we could be looking at Courage making a comeback. We could be looking at Bombardier, anything really. We could have a special release of Courage Imperial Stout. Carlsberg own it. Thanks for watching. Please put your comments in the comments box. Subscribe to our daily beer and food reviews. Give us a big fat thumbs up. Boom. Cheers.